The NI world is a phrase, an expression that I would like to add to our repertory of descriptions and concepts about the INFJ and possibly NI dominance in general. I think this is probably restricted to NI dominance, and I want to specifically focus on the INFJ perspective. But let me just give you a little bit of a word of warning. It's not very crazy warning as such, but this is a concept, or at least an idea, a notion that has been circulating in my mind only for a few weeks. I was trying to recently understand what is the source of what I like to call, and this is another bit of description that I think could be useful to add to our repertory of descriptions of the INFJ personality, the INFJ with reticence. Reticence, I think, is a nice word. You could also call it withdrawing, withholding. Reserve, I think, is a little bit more vague, but it does capture some of what I'm trying to get across. Is that it's not just in conversations with strangers that INFJ show this reticence. It's obviously most noticeable in conversations with strangers, but even when they are with people that are very familiar to them. In fact, even when they're on their own sometimes, and they are, walking around a room or sitting down or doing whatever they're doing, there is a reticence towards the world, the physical world and the social world, which means a withdrawing into something else. And I think this something else is the NI world, because there has to be a somewhere else. An INFJ who withdraws from the setting in external reality where they are. I mean, they remain there, but they're not completely there. And again, this is something that people might notice, people that you don't really want to be with, or you're with only for a short period of time because you have to. So this happens with family members, this happens with significant others, this happens with good friends. It happens with everyone, and it can be a source of confusion, particularly to a partner who might ask themselves, am I not completely fulfilling my partner's needs because they don't always seem to be present? Okay, this is a quintessential INFJ experience, by the way, regardless of the subtype that you are. And if you want to know more about that, you can read my new book, The Infinite Soul, which is a look at INFJ life in the modern world from various perspectives, but with the basic idea that in many ways the modern world is hostile to INFJs, how to find meaning, purpose and value in this world today. And you can get the link below. You can please leave a review, by the way, if you can, because I need more reviews for the referencing of the book. So if you did read it and loved it or liked it, a review would be super helpful. Consider it, please. And of course, there is the prequel, which is the Ecstatic Soul, which you might be familiar with already. Has more reviews, been out for a few years. Looks more at the structure of INFJ consciousness. I think it's a nice progression to start with the Ecstatic Soul and then read the Infinite Soul. And as you can see from the covers, they are prequel and sequel. They belong in the same series. But one of the essential points that I take in the Infinite Soul is that, well, first of all, language is very important. Type is alive. Type is something that is not rigid. Type is not dead. As soon as type is dead, it will stop being useful to us and we'll move on, find other things to help us navigate through meaning, value, and purpose in life, because we need to be activated by these things. Otherwise, we're not completely alive. Type needs to be alive. One of the ways to keep type alive is to multiply the possible descriptions of yourself through the lens of a type, including INFJ. So what an INFJ meant many, many centuries ago is not the same thing as what it means now. It might not mean exactly the same thing in France as it does in the US, or as it does in China, or as it does in Australia or Japan. In any case, bringing in new metaphors is one way to keep the INFJ description alive. And I actually further argue in The Infinite Soul that it is a particular INFJ talent, that INFJs are meaning-making beings, and that plugging into an I, they're able to come up with new metaphors. The NI world is such a new metaphor in some way. INFJs withdraw. INFJs go somewhere else. Sometimes they're in both worlds at the same time. This is partly a consequence of what I described in the Ecstatic Soul as alienation. Inferior Se means you're constantly detached from the world, not just in the sense that you're like, okay, I'm going to decide that I'm detached, right? Is that you are also, in a strong sense, not able to interact. You're easily overwhelmed. You get sensory overloads in many situations. So you retreat into another realm. And I used to think, well, you just, you're shut off in some sense. You're no longer there, and you're going to wait until you revive. in some way or other, in another part of your external reality, little domain. But I'm starting to think that there is a strong sense in which NI creates, because we have such holistic, when I say we, I mean INFJs, because we have such holistic minds. The nature of a holistic mind is that it has a network of beliefs and propositions in its head, as it were. It's holistic, everything has to fit together as parts to a whole, and the whole aggregates the parts and functions as a whole. This explains why INFJs are not necessarily the most adaptable to everyday reality, to new developments and so on, because they always have to update everything whenever there's a small update to make. But at the same time, it also means that they're quicker than other people at world making, at creating new worlds, ambitious new constructions, rather than something that you can see with extrovert perceivers, whether NE, sometimes SE, is coming up with very creative little tidbits here and there, but not necessarily a whole world. Which means that often people who are highly creative among extrovert perceivers, they're very happily at home in the external world. Of course, they may have creations that are very otherworldly in some ways, that they bring in lots of elements that are not necessarily as such like this already present in the world, but they are always in tune with what's out there in the world, in their creations. And I think that the creations of an INFJ are much more the product of alienation and of what's happening in the NI world, and the NI world being a kind of alternate reality. But it's not a reality like the external world. Again, this would be more like the any way of things, which is why when you look at the creations of an any dominant, in some sense, it's wacky, it's wonderful, it's colorful, but you kind of understand it. You don't need some sort of translation. It's not immediately completely obscure. Whereas the world of NI is something that is not in connection with the external world. It really is something else. Maybe to call it a world is not the right word, and maybe I'll come up with something different in the future, but for now I want to call that, I think there is a universe that NI creates, something psychic that is in there, and that we sometimes not completely realizing it, because again, it doesn't have the same coordinates or words or familiar objects of external reality. It's something different. It's symbolic, it's archetypal or archetypal, it's metaphorical. We can only grasp it slightly, but we are at home in it. It's like a womb in some way. And we always retreat to it whenever we feel heavily alienated from external reality. This is where we recharge our batteries. This is where people who see us in this state sometimes get to wonder what's happening to them. Are they okay? We're okay, but we don't behave when we are in that world, in the NI world, in the same way that we do when we're in external reality. That comes with some great potentials for creativity, some great benefits and advantages, of course, with some dangers as well, which I will be exploring in videos in the future. For now, I just wanted to share with you this idea that I think there is such a thing as at least a holistic domain that is in the psyche, that does not speak the language of external reality, and that NI dominants can retreat to and do retreat to when they feel heavily alienated from external reality. And that is potentially unique to NI dominance. Let me know what you think. Remember that you can get my 2 books. Give me a like if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget, I have a Patreon page. There's been more of you joining recently. Thank you so much, because these are difficult times, and I can really, I could really do with your support if you're willing to support my work from anywhere, $3.5, $3.50 a month. You can support my work, interact with me, and yeah, ensure that this continues if you enjoy my work. So consider it. There's a link below. Okay, see you guys. Bye-bye.